this has been a 20, this has been 12, 22-year long project, and it's been for the most part supported by Canada, especially in more recent years. Canada's been like you mentioned at the top here, just fully on board, totally committed to overthrowing Venezuela's government. No shame about it at all. But in 2002, there was a first coup attempt, U.S.-backed coup attempt that ousted Hugo Chavez. Actually succeeded for 2 days, and Machado was right in the thick of that. Like I said, she signed an infamous decree that abolished Venezuela's democratic institutions. Then in 2004, there was a recall referendum. Now, that was a legal process, but it was all sorts of shady things going on with bad exit polling, just outrageous attempts to claim that the 20-point victory by Chavez was actually stolen, which was nonsense. So, and then after that win by Chavez in 2004, with the spike in oil prices and the economy growing so well, the opposition more or less settled down a bit, and took a more or less openly subversive approach until 2014, a few years after the death of Chavez. Well, actually, no, actually 2013, when Maduro first won the election. There were already violent protests against because Maduro barely squeaked out a victory that time when he was first elected. It was a snap election called after Hugo Chavez passed away. So there were violent protests then. And then about a year after, in 2014, again, another set of violent protests that intended to oust Maduro. They failed. They killed scores of people, though. And in 2017, then by 2017, there was yet another attempt to oust Maduro through violent protests. They were more bloody, and they killed something like 120 people, end up dying in those protests. And then 2019, then Trump escalated his sanctions in 2017. In 2019 is when they recognized Juan Guaido. Trump basically appointed Juan Guaido as Venezuela's interim president, and he intensified economic sanctions in 2017. The broad economic sanctions against Venezuela were introduced by Obama in 2015 under an executive order that declared Venezuela to be an extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States, which is absolutely insane. But that's the executive order they've renewed every single year since then. Obama's sanctions were damaging, but Trump dramatically escalated them. He basically outlawed Venezuela from using the U.S. financial system, which unfortunately is the dominant financial system of the world. Two countries that trade, for example, in Latin America, having nothing to do with the United States, the money ends up flowing through because the way the payment system is structured, it ends up flowing through the U.S. financial system. So that's a consequence of U.S. global power, right? It's diminishing, but not quickly enough. They still have a lot of leverage that way. So that's why when they impose sanctions, they can be so damaging. People don't even realize how linked everything is to the U.S. financial system. Some people refer to it simply as the U.S. dollar. I prefer to just say the U.S. financial system. It's a payment system that's so embedded with the United States still. So when Trump did that caused severe damage to the Venezuelan economy, and then he proceeded every year since then to basically intensify those sanctions. In 2019, when they recognized Guaido, they also at that time basically made it illegal for the Venezuela to export or sell oil to the United States. And then they imposed sanctions that went after third parties, other so-called secondary sanctions to prevent Venezuela from trading with anybody else, not just the United States, but to basically put the pressure on other countries to not deal. And again, all the leverage they have is, again, this financial system that's so linked with Washington that it really trips everybody up if you get sanctioned by the United States, because your whole ability to pay anybody legally and not have property seized, payments held up, that really gets that gives them tremendous leverage. So recently, under Biden, there was a short period of 6 months where they because of all the problems they have with their proxy war in Russia, against Russia going badly, all sorts of things, oil prices spiking, inflation in the wake of the pandemic. There's some pressure on Washington to kind of ease up on Venezuela and loosen up, get more oil in the market. So they they scaled back their sanctions for about 6 months. They didn't remove them, but they scaled them back. But now they've re-intensified. Very recently, they re-intensified them back to being as harsh, pretty much as they always were, with some little exceptions here and there. But for the most part, these sanctions since 2017, I've seen an analysis um, that shows that they're like several times more harsh than the sanctions that the numerous countries imposed on apartheid South Africa during the when it was in power. Those sanctions were only imposed for 5 years. The Trump version of U.S. sanctions have now been imposed for 7. So it just shows you how unbelievably harsh and damaging these sanctions have been. They've been linked in a study in 2018 by Jeffrey Sachs and Mark Weisbrot. They showed that you could credibly, even by 2018, link the sanctions to tens of thousands of deaths through the impact on the healthcare system and so on. So you can imagine that's from 2018. So by now, it's much worse. Mind you, there has been in the past 3 years, there's been economic recovery. But technically, in the past 3 years, the Venezuelan economy has returned to growth after several years of declining. This year, there are projections by the IMF, I believe, that they'll grow by like 4%. But this is from a dramatic collapse of like 75% of GDP. It's just horrendous. People refer to it as a peacetime collapse, but that's not really correct. I mean, these are acts of war. If imagine if Venezuela did this to Canada's economy, made it contract by 75%, imposed basically a Great Depression on us. We'd be calling it an act of war. We wouldn't be calling it peacetime. In fact, if any country did that to Canada, people would be asking, why aren't we invading that country? Why aren't we doing something militarily against them to prevent them from doing this to us? But of course, Venezuela doesn't have that capacity. So they have to tread carefully, and that's, like I mentioned earlier, why they allow so much impunity for people like Machado, like Guaido, who was never arrested while he was in Venezuela. It's pretty remarkable.